time that we can discuss the things that need to be discussed. Just guide us and direct us, and we do ask these things in His Son's name. Amen.
Amen.
Okay, we're going to stand and do the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, we're going to change our program up just a little bit, and what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and have our program first, and then we'll have snacks after the program, and then we'll finish up our business meeting while we're snacking, okay? So I'm going to turn the meeting over to Helene.
Thank you, and I had told some of you that you could get your snacks and then go into the living room, but I see we're going to have, all of us get to join together and have our snacks. That's a very good idea, so thank you very much. I noticed that next month it's listed on this little program here, if you didn't get your sheet, that it's, our meetings are always AARP, the second Monday of each month at 6 o'clock. So next month will be our potluck dinner. And we would like to invite all of our guests to come for our potluck dinner, and since you are guests, it's a free meal on us. So you might want to be sure you come. It's also Patriot Day, and our speaker will be Bob Johnson. He is a retired Marine and a true patriot. So now I would like to introduce our ladies who are going to give our program. Carol Ratliff. Carol was raised in various places, so she probably has an interesting background. Carol, would you like to come up to the front, please? Various places throughout the U.S. and went to high school in Puerto Rico. I finally settled in Lubbock, Texas in 1971, where my two sons grew up. After eventually graduating from Texas Tech University, I taught junior English until 2013. After the death of my husband, I moved to Prattville to be closer to my younger son. This lovely town has been a warm, welcoming place that I am now happy to call home, and she is a wonderful new resident to have here. We're glad to have you here, Carol. Now, Pat Cummins, another very interesting person. Pat was born in Glasgow, Scotland, while working in the control tower at Prestwick Airport, which used to be Scotland's international airport. I met an American serviceman. We married in June of 1962, and in June 1963 came to the United States. I have lived in New Jersey, Texas, Colorado, and since 1977, Prattville, Alabama. I attended Troy State University in Montgomery, TSUM, as it was then called, and after graduating, practiced accounting in Montgomery and Prattville. I also taught accounting at TSUM. Since I retired in 2002, I have spent most of my time traveling and have had many wonderful experiences over the past 15 years, some of which I would like to share with you this evening. So we welcome these two ladies to Prattville, and for this wonderful program this evening. Rush has been in the news so much, so having had someone just been there this spring, it's going to be very interesting. So thank you ladies for coming.
Let me know if you can't hear me and I'll use this. If you can hear me, I'll do without it. Last year I came and talked to you, it was about India, and people said, well, why on earth did you want to go to India? Well, now it's Russia, and I'm getting the same questions. You know, why did you want to go to Russia? Especially now with all the things that have been going on. Well, when I was 16, going to school in Scotland, I took Russian classes. And the Russian professor who taught us the Russian language also taught us a lot about Russian history. And it just fascinated me, from talking about the different czars and then the move into communism. And of course back then they were still under communism because that was in the 50s. Anyway, That first stimulated my interest. In the 60s, my cousin and I went to see Dr. Zhivago, which I don't know how many of you have seen that. And that further stimulated my interest, especially Omar Sharif, because I sort of, associated him with what Russian men would be like. And so, when I went to Troy here in Montgomery, we had a Russian history class offered to us. And that class was co-taught by an American professor and a Russian who had worked with Khrushchev on the 5-year plans. And so I signed up, and that was the most interesting class, especially to actually have someone there who had worked with Khrushchev and actually worked on the plans. And so that was it. I started reading books, fact and fiction, about Russia, and continued to want to go. So it took me almost 60 years, but Carol graciously agreed to go with me. And so in May, we flew out of Montgomery. We flew to Frankfurt, and from Frankfurt we flew into Moscow, where we picked up a riverboat. I have a map in front here that you can come up and look at, or we can pass around. We got on the boat in Moscow, and we spent 4 days in Moscow. Before we left, we sailed up the Moscow Canal, because Moscow is not on the Volga River. Moscow is on the Moscow River, but it's not on the Volga, so you have to go through 6 locks before you finally get into the Volga River. And from there you'll see we traveled through several rivers, several lakes. We visited all sorts of little towns that were just absolutely wonderful, and finally ended up in St. Petersburg. Moscow, what can I say? If you've always been interested in Russia, to finally arrive in Moscow, the first thing I learned, you've all heard of the Kremlin. And I've always thought the Kremlin was Moscow, the head of government. However, in Russia, the word Kremlin means fortress or citadel. And all of the larger towns had Kremlins. Within the Kremlin, it was almost like a medieval town. They had the seats of government, the palace, the churches, everything within this walled fortress. However, when you see the Kremlin with capitals, it's referring to the Moscow Kremlin.
They'll be up here on the table, but this is the outside.
And it is red, and it has the wall all around, and has many, I think 14 towers. There used to be eagles on the top of the towers when the czars were in power, but when the communists took over, all the eagles were demolished, and they now have stars on top of all of the towers. It was thrilling to me to sit there in Red Square, looking at Lenin's tomb, eating borscht. It was just wonderful, and the sun was shining. We couldn't have asked for a nicer day. The only thing we learned pretty quickly, that although there's no longer communism in Russia, the government rules with an iron hand. We spent 4 days in Moscow trying to get back into Red Square so that we could actually visit Lenin's tomb, because they're thinking about moving him. So it would really have been nice to see him before he left. Anyway, the government didn't open it. It stayed closed the whole time we were in Moscow. We'd show up at the gates, they were locked, you couldn't get in. We'd come back later, they were locked. The tour guides called, they were told it would be open. We never got back into Red Square. It stayed locked the whole time. So, and there were hundreds and hundreds of tourists there trying to get in.
You're getting ready for a parade.
So
Getting ready for a parade.
Oh yeah, yeah.
They had business.
We didn't even see the parade though, So the government still rules with an iron hand. But it was a treat, really, to just sit there and see all these things. So the tour took us to an absolutely fabulous subway system. Now, you've all ridden the subway probably somewhere or other. You have never seen a subway system like the one in Moscow. magnificent paintings, marble, chandeliers, sculptures, statues. One station was more amazing than the next. And Carol will tell you a little more about that and our incident in the subways. I've never seen subways. It was like being in museums with all the wonderful artwork that they had. Absolutely magnificent. Another thing they had in Red Square was the GUM department store. GUM means the main store. It's the Russian language, the abbreviation. I've been to many malls in America, really lovely malls, but I have never seen a mall like the GUM department store. If you're able to Google, I would suggest you Google GUM in Moscow. Absolutely filled with, was it apple blossoms or cherry blossoms?
I'm not real sure, but they
It was
were
filled with
filled with
blossoms
pink
and
blossoms.
fountains and the most magnificent stores. And that was where we had our taste of caviar. We sampled in the store. And then we thought, before we went back to the ship, that maybe we'd have some caviar and vodka for lunch.
at a little bar.
Little bar in the mall, just like you'd see at Eastdale,
kiosk.
you know. So we pick a table and the young man comes over and leaves the menus and we start looking. And for a little sample of caviar and a little vodka, was it $400?
$400. We were going to splurge, but we didn't.
No, we decided that was a bit much. We were glad we got the free sample in the grocery store.
That was $400 American?
Yes, yes,
What would
the equivalent. It was thousands. The exchange rate was 60 rubles to the dollar. So, and things normally were incredibly cheap there, apart from the caviar and the vodka. Well, that whole mall was not cheap. You know, they had Prada, they had Ferragamo, they had all these high-end Jimmy Choo place. Everything was really high-end. Just the kind of place that you go and look, you know, you don't do much shopping.
If you could have seen us sit there, and both of us in our minds converting the money. The shock.
We needed a shot of vodka after that, but we'd really have needed it if we'd ordered it without figuring out how much it was going to cost us. So,
Excuse me,
yes,
were those shoes made in China?
was Jimmy Choo made in China? They might have paid that. But I think isn't that what the film stars wear?
Yes.
These Jimmy Choos and pay thousands of dollars for a pair of shoes. So, yeah, I've never shopped there. But it was an absolutely amazing department store. Round the corner from Red Square was the Bolshoi Ballet, a huge big statue of Karl Marx, and the Metropole Hotel, which I don't know if any of you have read The Girl from the Metropole Hotel or The Man from Moscow. And both of these books deal with the Metropole Hotel in Moscow. Both really well worth reading. An old hotel that's been there since, you know, the early actually 1800s, I think, wasn't it? So, what else do we do in Moscow? Did not go to the Bolshoi Ballet. That was another thing we were going to do, and that was also $400 for a seat at the Bolshoi.
But we did have passengers, friends who we palled around with, who actually went to the Bolshoi that night, but we decided
It seemed a shame to be in Moscow and not go to the Bolshoi Ballet, but $400 again was just a little bit too steep. And you couldn't get tickets. The girl worked for 3 days trying to get tickets for the Bolshoi. You know, over here, if you want to go to the theater and there's seats available, you buy the tickets. Over there, the thought is, you cannot expect to show up the night before the Bolshoi is going to be on and expect to get a ticket, even if there's seats. And there were plenty seats available, but that mentality was, no, you have to book months ahead of time in order to be able to see the ballet. So, again, we were saved from reckless spending. Yes?
I have about 3 questions to ask you before we leave Moscow. Did you use your Russian that you had learned over there?
I did, and it was really strange because I hadn't studied Russian in years. I was 16, 18 when I graduated high school, and I bought a, Russian for Dummies book and tried to refresh myself, and I don't know, this old brain it wouldn't stay. I could not remember because they use the Cyrillic alphabet, which is a totally different alphabet from we have. Letters and sounds, and they're all different letters. So I just gave it up, and I bought a translator for my phone. And you can use the translator, you can say it in English, and it translates it to Russian. And so I thought, I'll just use this. So after about 2 days in Moscow, and looking at signs and things,
We were on the bus.
It was like
I remember the moment.
it was like a light switch came on, and I said to Carol, I can read this. It just like it came back. So, I don't know, ask me where it came from, but it did. And I've got a photo album here. There's some photographs in there. There's some of McDonald's and the signs in Russian. So it let you see it. And then the menu. And Pizza Hut was just Pizza Hut. They just had their regular sign. But McDonald's, it was actually in Russian. You had another question.
One of the other questions was, you mentioned the cherry, the blossoms. Now, they were in the
Mall.
Now, were they actual growing trees?
Yes. Yeah. And then in our back street,
Skylights at the top.
the whole top of it was glass.
And they were blooming when you were
They
there?
were blooming
That would be
beautifully.
early spring.
That was mid-May.
The other question, the mall and the ballet, did it seem like they were catering to tourists? Is there that much money in Russia to afford some of the?
There was a lot of Russians in the mall. Yeah.
Families.
I think there are a lot of billionaires now in Russia. When the Soviet Union collapsed in December of 1991, and I was actually teaching accounting at Troy when that happened, and I remember giving assignments to students that, how do you go from being a communist country to being a capitalistic society? The prostitutes in Moscow, after the fall of communism, were because everybody was given shares in the businesses and things. You got stock shares because the way the communists had believed, all of these assets belonged to the people. And so now you've all got a share, albeit a small one, in all of the assets of the country. Well, the prostitutes in Moscow were accepting stock shares instead of cash for their services. To most of the people, the stock shares were worthless. They were, what are they going to do with them? But they were astute enough to collect shares of stock instead of cash. That was it. That was all. Anybody got any questions about Moscow? Yes.
Was Walmart in that mall?
Nope. I didn't even see a Walmart.
Never saw one.
McDonald's, but no Walmart?
No Walmart. Nope. They had a lot of local markets, and we did go to local markets where the fresh fruit and vegetables and things were, but no Walmart. No.
And I'm not leaving Moscow. I'm going to be still talking about Moscow.
Okay.
Pat, I got a question.
Yes,
Is
Greg.
the underground subway, is that a transportation system that everybody uses?
Yes, and it's large. It's almost like the London when it covers such a large area. It was started in the 1930s, I believe, and finished up in the 1950s. It was used during World War II, where the people, for the bombings, the people lived down in the
And they never
subway
stopped
system.
building during World War II either.
They what?
They never stopped building during World War II.
No,
They continued building the subway during the war.
It's a magnificent system, really nice, clean, fast-moving trains.
Very crowded?
The tour guide was good about taking us outside of commuter hours. And so they were busy. You stood, there was times you didn't get a seat on it. But everybody was very well mannered. You didn't get the pushing and shoving that you get in some places. The Russian people are they're really a